Let's do this. What you notice is that checklist looks, I don't know, kind of skimpy, but I like these projects. I didn't write them originally. I tweak them sometimes, but I think they're good exercises that teach you what you need to know for these topics. So I don't know how much I want to show on this one because I think a lot of this it's both. Once you get a couple, the rest of them make sense, I think, is what I'm trying to say about it. And you guys should already know aggregate functions like average and sum and group by and having. We'll review at least one or two of those as well. But the reading, by the way, it says the certain pages, they're kind of like reading ahead, because if you check the way you learn how to do the things for this week, for this week's lab, are from previous week's reading. So you just want to go back to that. So this is starting on page 90 or so. Actually, yeah, it's chapter 4. That's where this stuff starts. So you have these functions in Oracle built in. So this was right and left padding, just to show you how this works. So just how to read, you'll have a lot of these functions. They don't have to be capitalized. I try to make them stand out, though. I might not be consistent on that. But you'll have functions with arguments. There's an edit there. Anyway, I was talking about how these are Oracle functions. And I expect most of you have had some level of programming language learning so far. So it works just like other functions. You have the name of the function and the arguments. Or parameters. In this case, what you're looking at are arguments, right, that fit parameters. Methods are functions that are member functions of objects. That's the only difference. So if you might just know the term method because we use it because all of our all the languages we teach are object oriented. So depending, maybe if you're in a C++ class, you'll hear function more often. But anyway. So you'll give these arguments and they'll return some value, and that'll be in the place here. So in this particular case, this is just right padding to the right of something that you're selecting, and this is left padding, so to the left. And what the arguments mean, this is the value that you're looking up. So products has a name column, right? So that's the thing you're selecting, kind of, if you leave everything else out. And you're saying you want to pad up to 30 spaces. Characters width, pad up to 30 width, character width, I guess. And what do you want to pad with? Notice the single quotes, this kind of like a string, or it's a string because notice there's two here. It's a string in single quotes of what you want to pad it with. So we want to pad with a period. On the other hand, for the price, we want to pad to the left with this sequence asterisk plus sign. We want to pad 8. So when you run this, I've already run it, but let's clear it out and run it. I mean, it's going to do the same thing, but anyway. So you can see the name being right padded by 30 with the dot. If you actually count these out, which I did, including the space, if you count everything up to this dot right here, you get 30. Same thing here. If you count all these characters, you'll get 8. This is easier to count, so we'll go ahead and do it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's a bunch of these functions that will allow you to kind of format what you get from your queries, and this is an Oracle specific thing. I'm sure I'm trying to think about how you do this in SQL Server. I never had a need to do this because you were really not presenting it immediately there. You would do like a return through programming to a front end and then format it there. But there might have been reasons to do this that just never came up in other DBMSs. So this is the kind of thing that's going to vary between SQL dialect wise between the different DBMSs. All right, so there's that one, and I think there's a question. I'll look. Looks like number 5 and 6 in the lab for this week include this, and maybe some other ones where it's buried in the middle of it and I can't see it. But I know the LPAD and RPAD are in 5 and 6 for this week. So I might be jumping around a bit too. I just kind of want to like give you enough to where you can like finish your lab. So this LPAD, RPAD, it is kind of towards the beginning of chapter 4, but there might be some other things because we talk about aggregate functions. I'm going to show an example of one of those. Show an example of doing a little bit of math and using 2char, which is another function. The main functions you need for your code this week are 2char, LPAD, RPAD, the aggregate ones like sum and count and stuff like that. Is that it? You just got to remember, continue to know how to concatenate. Oh, and case, when, and else is also, it's kind of like an if structure you can put in your SQL. It's weird, but you know, it's a thing. You do have that quite a bit in other languages too. I think it's fairly similar in SQL Server. There's a case. Is it case when? I know it's case something. It's been a while, but you have that thing in other dialects as well. And to date. To date's important because to date will allow you to specify what format that you want the date to be in. And there's a lot of different versions. There's one even that you'll have in a later lab where you spell out everything. Like it writes out the words for, so it'd be like the 16th of, you know, like that. It's just kind of neat actually. So with that being said, let me dig up like aggregate functions. I think I'll do next, and then we'll probably jump back around to 2char and date, to date, and all that kind of stuff too. So let me see what I can find here. Okay, so let's start with count, and there's an example of count on page 127. I'm going to show it to you real quick because there's something I want to say about count. It's kind of overlooked quite a bit when you first learn about it. So select count from products. I'm going to just start typing lowercase because my brain doesn't want to do all caps, and I hate caps lock. So all right, so you can see here the count function is counting the occurrences of product ID when you do this select where you don't have any wheres or anything. It's counting the number of occurrences of this value right here. So one thing I want to talk about with that is this. Let's do the star. Use this because it looks more like the book when you do this. Let me do this though. It gets confusing when you got a bunch of prior ones there. Oh, okay, I see why it's doing that. It's because it's 2 pages. So there are 12 items, 12 rows selected. Why? So you learn the star a lot. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the whole table. I wanted to show you that. But you learn this quite a bit. And it's oftentimes it's awful. It's awful. It's horrible. It's useful because you want to like just know how many rows are in the table, how many records. Star means, right, it does a projection across all the columns. That's the meaning of, I mean, I'm reusing those terms that you need to know for the test and everything. So the projection is all the columns, right? But all the columns means you get something. Why? Because it's a relational database and it's going to have a primary key. And the primary key is not ever going to be null by definition of a primary key. If you've got a primary key defined in a table, and you should if it's a relational database, then even if everything else in that row is null, the primary key won't be. So if you do star, you'll get the primary key along with everything else. So you'll count how many records there are in the table. Now, what count does actually is it counts the number of non-null occurrences of that attribute, that column value for across the rows that you've selected in the select or whatever. So if you did have nulls, like if you picked some other column that had nulls in it, you would get a smaller number, and that's the long and short of why I'm showing you this, because you can actually select. It's not just star every time, is what I'm trying to say. You can also select things that are not star, specific field names. There's another term for it, field. Now this table doesn't have any nulls. Let me pause. Okay, here's one. I stopped doing the script version because it's more compact. So if you select star from customers, which is a table that you should have, I think, because I'm using the student account, so yeah, I have all the stuff you have so far. You get these records. One of them has a null in the phone number, so we don't have a phone number for Doreen Blue. At least I don't. Maybe it might depend on what you've done so far. I don't think we changed that one, though. I'm pretty sure we didn't. So let's do this. Let's select the count of the phone of the customers. There should be 5 if there's 5 customers, but you get 4. Why? Because it counts all the non-nulls. So again, if you count the stars for the customers, you'll get 5 because the primary key at the very least will have a value. So you'll always get the actual count of rows if you count star, because you'll always get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if you count anything else, I don't even know why I tried to type what I'm top at. Got dogs on the mind too. I've got these fingerless gloves on. Do we have no date of birth for somebody? Let's check. I thought we had dates of birth for everybody, but let's see what's going on here. Oh, we don't. So there, yeah, they even showed me. My eyes didn't see that null when I was looking. It's like the gorilla in the basketball or whatever. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out because that's something that I think it tripped me up at some point, and I'm like, I wish somebody told me that's how count works. It's not just count star; it's counting in the base case in a way is that it counts a field's occurrence across the record. So, and again, if one of those fields happens to be null, you don't get the count you're expecting sometimes, or maybe you do because you want to say how many phone numbers, right? You can always work null or is null or whatever into the where as well to like catch things like that, but whatever, you get the idea. So just to remind you, how does sum work? You sum. It needs to be some kind of quantitative value. I don't think we have any here. Let's do something let's do the example from the book actually. So we don't have a. It's making me wonder. I'm trying to remember. I don't know if I ever used sum on something that's not like numerical. So I'm not sure what happens when you sum dates. But I'm not going to do it right now because I don't want to get into it. That's a project for you to like look up. I'm thinking with strings too. Is it something to do with ASCII maybe, or would it just give you an error? I can't even tell you because I don't think I've ever tried it. And you should always try things like that. I don't want to waste your time though, so I'm not going to do it right now. But that's a project you could do. So there we go. This is just showing you how sum works. And so you pick a field that has a quantity that you want to sum up, and it sums it. So you can do the math yourself to check if this is correct. But I would trust it. It's better. It's a better calculator. As long as sum's working correctly, it's a better calculator than my brain would be. Or even if I wrote it out, I'd probably make a mistake with that many. Who knows? Probably not, but maybe. It's more likely than the Oracle engine making a mistake. And then there's a bunch of other ones. So if you've got statistics, standard deviation, and variance, and all that kind of stuff is in here. So, and those would be off the average. So let's show average. So what's the average price? Average is AVG. AVG, and I'm doing all caps still. That's just by convention. That's a sort of loose convention for SQL, is that you put all the SQL stuff, commands, whatever, keywords in. All the stuff that's blue, I guess, in all caps. All the stuff that's blue in Oracle right now, in other words. So this should be the average price across that whole column for all the products. So, of course, variance would be, what is variance? The square of the difference from the average. So the difference from the average, right, you do the square, I guess, you always get a positive value because you just want to know how, it's like almost like an absolute value kind of thing, right? A variance will tell you how far on average you are from the, so to speak, from the average. It's been a while since I did that. I think that's basically correct. Just some of you guys might know statistics better than I do. So, Yeah, it's the square of the difference from the average. Anyway, yeah, now I'm wondering about it. And then standard deviation is the square root, so you kind of get back to the average amount that it varies by. And I've done something wrong because I didn't spell it all the way. There's 2 D's. Standard deviation. So the standard deviation. So the price, you know, kind of varies by 11ish, whatever statistically that means. I don't know why I showed you all that because I've never used them before, but I just saw them like, that's interesting. Like, why don't I just show those two? All right, and then when you're using aggregates, you'll often want to do you want to use the group by and halving stuff. So this might be a review for you, but if not, you know, I'll show you how this works. So let's say we have this comes up a lot when you have categories or areas of effect, like different states or something. So you might want to say, let's just say you got sales. I feel like I talked about this in another video, but I don't know if it's your class, the other class, because it's all database stuff and it runs together in my head. But let's say you've got the aggregate functions that we just showed, right? And you see how they give you one value. It's one value. It's a single field table in a way. It's one row and it's one column. It's one value. In other words, it's one data value, which technically, again, is closure still as far as relational math goes. I think I talked about that in this class. Again, I hope I did. But relational math is the underpinning of relational databases, right? And relational algebra has a principle called closure, which means that you take as the relations input into the functions that you have in relational algebra. And the answer, the result, will be also a relation. And so in this case, you have, with the aggregate functions, you have single column, single row tables, or really just one cell, right? One value, one field. But let's say you did have like a bunch of cells. In this case, let me show you the one I want to do. It's actually prices. So or categories of products in this case. So let's just do this one, and we'll talk about what's going on. So we're going to select product type ID, comma, count, and we're going to count row ID. I think row ID is an Oracle built-in thing. For each table is going to have a row ID. From products, I think this makes things more confusing actually. They should just use the primary key of products. But group by product type ID. And then we're going to order by. This is the order by you can use just like you would with any other. We just want to put these in an order, right? So we're going to use product type ID as the order we put them in. So let me say in English what does this do first. So we're going to make it to where we show what the product type ID is, and we're going to count the number of rows, but we're going to do it within each ID instead of just for the whole table. For every product ID there is, it will be shown in the select, and we'll have the count for that product type ID from the products table. I hope that makes sense the way I described it. So we're saying that there are 2 occurrences of product type ID 1, 4 of product type 2, 2 of product type 3, and 3 of product type 4. And then some product didn't have a type, and there's one of those. That's what this is showing. So let's actually save this to the clipboard so we can come back to it if we want to. And just look at the table. So select star from products. So you got product type ID. You could have used that instead. This is the row ID, I think, over here. It's not part of the table. It's part of Oracle. It's part of the DDL instead of the actual data. But anyway, product type ID. So we don't know what these IDs are because it's in a different table, but we've seen them before. think there's some like books and videos and games or movies. That's why I can't remember what all the different product types are. But we've seen them before. And so it's just like, these two are books, I think. So Modern Science and Chemistry, there are 2 of those. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of product type 2, and then 2 of 3. And I mean, we can eyeball it because it's a small table, right? But if it were a big table with lots more product IDs, it'd be nice that we got some SQL that counts it up for us. So I hope that makes sense from what you just saw. I would change this. I don't know why. Row ID. Maybe that's a standard thing. It's not anything that a best practice that I learned, but maybe it is a best practice. I don't know. In Oracle, but it should give you the same results. You're just making sure that you count every row. Now, I mean, of course, yeah, forget that. I'm not gonna go into that. But you get the idea. So this is how group by works. So notice that the thing you're grouping by is up here. Let me just show you something you might try to do. Like, I want to know what the products are too. What are each of these products? So you'll try to naively type, let's say just product ID. Let's say we have it memorized or whatever. Then you try to add that to the function so you can see what the IDs are, but you can't because there's nowhere for them to go. Because like, right, there's 1 row for each ID. So which product do you pick to put on that row? It's something you can't do. So the thing that you have in the group by is the only thing that you can have up here in the select, and vice versa. That's how that relates to each other. Well, that's how it makes sense to my mind anyway. And there's some examples of things you can't do on the next few pages, but I just want to throw a having in. So the thing you'll try to do is, let me type the thing you'll try to do first. So you might try something like this. Let's select product type ID. I want to get the average prices by product ID. Now again, this is not the average price of all the products. This is the average price of each ID. So each category of products, in other words. And you might try to do this, where the average, but you only want to know the expensive categories of products, not where, you know, like cheap stuff. You just want to know everything that's above $20, I guess. And then you're still going to group by like you did before. Type ID. So you'll want to try that because you just want to use where. And don't ask me why. There's some mechanical reason. I used to kind of understand it why this doesn't work, but I think it's because you could do wheres as well with havings, I think, and certain like complex constructions. I should show an example if I can find one. But anyway, instead of when it's group by and you're doing the aggregate thing, you don't use where, you use having. And notice it's average price here, it's average price here. That's usually how it works. And then that's wrong because I missed something. Let me see what I missed. What did I miss? Oh, I didn't group. Did I group? No, I grouped by. Oh, you got to do the group by first. I always mess that up. Always forget. Having's at the end, just like it is in a where. So that where wouldn't have. Let me see. Yeah, the example in the book has the group by at the bottom too for the where. So the example, that's not the reason it doesn't work though. But if you fix it this way, it's a good error to make because then maybe you won't make it, because I've done that before. I put the group by last. I'm like, and then I'm having this, and then I'm going to group it by because I still have to. It seems like it shouldn't matter, but you group by first and then you do the having. So again, if you leave this out, it just shows you the average price of all the product IDs, but you add the group by back in. And it restricts it to, I guess, 1 and 2 product types. Unless you mess something up, which I did. There we go. I didn't even see that I did that. So yeah, 1 and 2. That's not just the number 1 and number 2. It's those two. Product type 1 and product 2 just happen to be the 2 that are above 20. Okay. That's enough for the aggregate stuff. That's going to be, let me look. You're going to have number 3. It's going to have sums and counts. Number, I think that's it. Okay, I think that's it, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a search. You see the F over there, that's where it's coming from. Control F. Yeah, it looks like the last one has a sum as well and an average and a sum. Number 10 has a bunch of things together actually. And then there's a sum, and I have to scroll left and right every time. There's a sum in 3, a sum in 5, a sum in 10. So 3, 5, and 10, I think. And averages and counts and a couple of the others. Number 10's got an average as well as a sum. Average and a number. There's an average in number 2. Average in number 3. A couple, at least, yeah. So you get the idea. There's a few of these aggregate functions that we just covered in different parts of Lab 4. Okay, so the next thing I want to show is this. This is for number 1, and it's like also for a couple of the other ones in Lab 4, and then for the rest of the semester almost, you're going to have this kind of thing come up every now and then. And this is like using concatenation and literal strings together with the things you're selecting to like make sentences. Not like make sentences, but make sentences. I never knew I had a like habit until I've listened to myself talk. I'm like, see, I'm appalled that I do that. So it's a work in progress. So let's do this. So what I want to make is like a sentence that's like, let's do, I'm thinking of a sentence to write right now. I think I have one in mind though. Let's do it this way. Employee, no, it's a single quote. Employee ID concatenate. Oh wait, hold on. Number. Close that thing. Concatenate. And see it. As long as this pops up, you know you're doing something that's going to like work, even if it doesn't look right. But don't forget where your spaces are. You need a space on each side of one of those things that returns. So employee ID number, and I don't remember how to do this. I don't want to look it up. Employee ID number, and then I want to have that. I want to just say this. Employee ID number, no, that's not right. Number whatever has a first name of. The thing is, I don't want to do the a possessive because then it's escape. It's probably just like a backslash single quote, but I don't remember for sure, so I don't want to go look it up and everything right now. That's a task for you to look up. Don't forget the single quote. Has a first name of concatenate. Don't forget concatenate like I do. Not Frist, not Bill Frist. Is he still around? I haven't heard of his name in a while. Has a first name of and a last name of. Let's just do that. Concatenate the last name. And then I'm just put like the cherry on top. I'll put in a period at the end. I don't need a space there, right? I think I did double quotes, maybe. No, I don't know. Let's see. Let's run this. This may or may not run because whenever I have a big long thing of text, there's a lot more chance I'll muck it up. Oh no, there we go. And you need to use the scripting sometimes, I think, for these. Either that or something else was going on. But anyway, you can see what employee ID number 1 has a first name of James and a last name of Smith. Employee ID number 2 has a first name of Ron and a last name of Johnson. And so on. So you see how I do that. I just literally put in the things that I want to be in the select in single quotes as strings. Then I concatenate what the return will be for that. Now, that's number 1. is more or less like this, except one small hitch. And that's the fact that, so, you know, if you haven't got to look at this already, go ahead and get it before, you know, pause and write it down or type it out. If you don't know how to do this already, get this saved, because we're going to talk about the hitch on this. So this is for number one. Number one also has money. And as far as I know, if I remember correctly, the money is not going to become a string automatically. You have to convert it to a string. So you see how there's a salary here? Let's try it. So let's say, let's do it this way. This way. Let me remember what I want to say now. First name concatenated with a space. I think that's all I need, right? First name, last name, concatenated with, gets paid, concatenated with, and here's what you want to do right now, right? And then just, again, properly end your sentence if you want, like that. Let's see if this works. I'm not sure. It may work, it may not. It works. Okay, so it works, but if you want to format this at all, you'll have to do some formatting on it. So what if we wanted like the commas in the right place and maybe formatted as money and all that sort of thing? So that's where the toChar function comes in this particular case. So also something else about this, I'd like to have better things at the top for what do you call them, aliases, but we won't worry about that right now. I'll let you figure out the aliases, because you'll have to do that in yours, but I'll show you how to do the salary thing. So it's going to be toChar, it's a function, and you want to do a toChar on the salary. So this is going to take whatever's the arguments you send to it in parentheses, and it's going to return a string that's formatted a certain way. How is it formatted? It's formatted by this thing, what you type right here. So this is really annoying because I can't tell you exactly the rules. I just know I figured them out, and I don't have a systematic way of describing what's going on here, and I apologize for that. But formatted as money in the local currency, I think that's, if I remember right, this is like from a year ago. This is the last time I did this, but I think this is what it means. You can look it up. I'm going to pause. All right, I was wrong. FM removes leading and trailing spaces from the number. So if you don't do that, you'll get this kind of standard spacing between results that looks bad sometimes. And so when in doubt, and some of these labs, this comes up. There was one, there's a devil to figure out, and then you're like, oh, I just need to use FM. It will get rid of the spacing. So like the actual result of the toChar comes up and gets up almost next to the paid after the space and paid, instead of being like knocked over a bit. It's kind of hard to describe until you see it. Try doing what I'm doing right now without the FM and see what happens. The L returns a local currency, so that is local currency. So the FM is more about spacing, getting rid of, it's like a trim, kind of, maybe. And then the L is space. This is all on page 114, by the way. I could just tell you. And then on 115, actually, more helpfully, in my opinion, is always more helpful. You do want both. You always want both, because you'll eventually find you'll get comfortable using something by looking at all the examples. And then you'll find, once you're comfortable, and this is usually only going to happen like after you're really comfortable with it, you're like, but how do I do this? So then you want to go back and look at the specifications. But it's always the other way around for me. I don't want to look at the specifications first and then try to imagine what all the examples you see on 115 are. The examples on 115, you might want to mark that page, because toChar comes up a lot. That's much better, in my opinion, as serving the purpose of telling you how to use it. So anyway, let's see what I get now when I run this. And again, I might have to do the scripting one, or I don't know what's going with it, or I don't get results sometimes, but scripting always seems to bring it up. So you see there's an issue here with this one. Let me see what the problem is, because I know this one works. All right, it took me 1 second. I just had to look at the example I have, because this is in your homework. The thing about your homework, the numbers you're using are smaller. They're much bigger in this one. So I just had to add a few 9s right here. So if you don't do the 0, 0 after the dot, I forget what happens. Like, what happens if you put 9, 9 here? Let's just see. Yeah, it does something weird. So like the zeros you have to have there, because what it's saying is that in the case where you have a 0 value for the quantity, actually put a placeholder 0, like a leading 0 sort of almost, instead of just putting nothing. Sometimes people prefer to have like no cents shown at all if there are no cents, and sometimes they prefer to have always like the zeros or whatever. So if you always have a certain number of zeros in your after the decimal point, and which is what we're saying we're going to do in this case, then you put 0, 0. But if you just put 9, 9 and your salaries were like 93 cents or something, then that would show up. But anyway, I just had to put enough digits, and I had to give the pattern, which is the after every 3 digits have this. Now, what happens if you put too many? I don't remember. Let's do 9, comma. Just mess around with it to see what the pattern is. And again, it's been so long for me. It looks like it doesn't change anything. But it's been so long for me, I don't remember exactly. What happens if I put zeros here? Yeah, that was the right. It looks the same. I don't know. It's weird, but you'll get the hang of it after a while, to where you at least get something that you're comfortable. You're like, this is acceptable. This looks like the answer I'm supposed to get. Anyway, that's one example of 2char. So 2char is going to be the thing that you want. It's usually going to be a numerical thing or date maybe right here, and then you want to format it. And the second argument is going to be the format pattern, and those patterns again are 114, 115. While looking for the next thing, which is like the 2-date stuff that I want to show you, I just realized I can show you what happens if you take the FM out up here. So I took the FM out, and this is what kind of thing you get. You get some kind of left padding to it, or cell spacing almost is the way I think of it from web stuff. But and what the exact rules are, I couldn't list them out. I couldn't delineate them as like a lawyer would or something. or the person who wrote the specs is probably a better example instead of trying to make an analogy. But yeah, I don't know what the exact rules of why this happens. I don't know what they are, but I just know that if you put FM here, your problem goes away. How about that? This Oracle stuff. Again, my background's more SQL Server, but it's got its own mysteries. So, and I'll tell you what, my least favorite thing about any programming IT language, programming language IT domain or whatever, is formatting text. It's just like so boring to me. I'm like, I'm sure it's possible. I'll look up how to do it and make it work, and then, but you do need to know that the 2char work that exists, and you can use it for things in Oracle. And then, like, you'll probably always in this class anyway be able to look it up if you need to. It's not something you would have to pull out of your memory unless, I guess, you take there is a certification for Oracle stuff. So if you want to start studying for that, start doing that now. With that being said, when I come back, I should be talking about 2-date. Okay, the example to go by is on page 148. We'll see what it does. This will probably be the last example. I don't think there's anything. There's other weird things you need to figure out, but I'll let you figure them out. This is just to get you started, give you some momentum. And I think from here, you should be able to figure out the other things. There's a create table and update. I think you guys won't have problems with that, but if you do, just send me an email, let me know, or maybe if it seems like a weird enough thing, I probably won't make a video, but I might make a post, an announcement or something. We'll see what happens. But in any case, I think this is enough to get you started. So, okay, so you want to go in both directions. And here's one where you're going from the string, basically, to an actual date. So keep in mind a date, just like all data types in programming, for example, a date's different from the character string that represents the date. Just like numerals in ASCII are different from the actual number. So the bit pattern for 4, for example, is different from the numeral ASCII bit pattern for the numeral, the Indo-Arabic numeral 4 that we normally think of in the Western world as 4. If we're not thinking about 4 actual things in our head, we see that figure, right? That's different from the bit pattern for that value. Same with the date. The date's got a certain bit pattern. Who knows what it is? It's probably a complex thing. It depends on the system too. And then there's strings that we use to indicate them. So this is just ASCII J, ASCII lowercase u, ASCII lowercase l. You see what I'm saying? And so to take this pattern of characters and convert it into an actual date in the way that Oracle stores a date. There's only one way it stores this date. The bit pattern for this, for that date of July 4th, 2021, is going to look the same in Oracle as a date value, regardless of how we would write it. So we need a way to interpret what we've written. So this is saying that here's the format. I've got the dates, I've got the month spelled out, and then I got 2 digits for the day, and then I have 4 digits for the year. That's what I'm doing. Convert that to when it looks like this. That's the expected pattern. This is the actual date that I want you to convert to a date for Oracle. So that's one direction. Okay, and here I just did off the top of my head, actually. There's a chart. Here's what you want. The useful chart for this stuff is like 140, 1, 2, 3, 43, 140, 140. Looks like it starts on 141. And it goes for a couple pages. So there's all kinds of different ways you can do dates. There is this, save this for the future. In a future lab, you have to do a date that's sort of like what I just did here. So look, they're telling us how to say 2021. I'm wondering. I'm going to try something here in a second. But so I took the same thing that I just did. I converted that. Let me do my mouse. I converted this expression. Yeah, I'm eating a Nutter Butter bite snack sack. Sorry. So I take this expression, this way of writing a date, convert it using this pattern and say, hey, this is the way I'm writing this date. Convert this to an actual date in Oracle. And then I'm using that as the first argument to toChar to say, hey, I want you to take this date that I've stored in Oracle, and I want you to write it to the screen in a select. And again, this is all dual, right? I didn't mention this already, but you learned that a couple lessons ago. I want you to spell out everything. And you can vary this, by the way. Let me just show you real quick. If you do all caps like that, it'll be all caps for that part. It's kind of neat, literal. It kind of bothers me at the same time. You know, all lowercase. It's kind of an ingenious way of doing it. I just feel like it's sort of inexact somehow, but it works. So, who am I to say that it shouldn't be done this way? It feels good, but it also feels uneasy. You know what I mean? Maybe you understand what I'm trying to get at or not. As far as the spacing, I know there's a way to get rid of the spacing too. I can't remember off the top of my head. FML in here just messes it up. So, don't try that. Or do try that. Did I put the FML here? I don't think this. Oh, FM. I'm sorry, not FML. Does that work? Oh yeah. Okay, it works. Just try it and it works. I love it. So I'm curious about this. Apparently Oracle's saying we should pronounce this 2021. What does it say about this? 2002. Interesting. What's like a gray area? 2010 or 2010? 2010. I bet it's 2009. It's kind of weird psychology on how we doesn't 20 doesn't sound right until you get to the bigger number, in my opinion. Like, did they say 1905? That's what we say, right? Or did they say 1905? 2005 sounds right, but 1905 doesn't. I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, 2009. So this is enough for you to get started. That's about 45 minutes, and I'll stop here. Bitcoin just hit 50,000 again, but it's back down to 49.9. Anyway, interesting. I'll talk to you soon.